How to stop emotional eating. Watch this video to learn quick ways to prevent or stop emotional eating, combat cravings, and identify your triggers. Once you implement these tips, you can find more enjoyable ways to feed your feelings, relieve stress, and eat to feel better. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Sweetie Kiwi Show, the world's #1 infotainment show. I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing great. And if you're doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka, and let's roll. Now, what is emotional eating? The thing here is that a lot of folks don't eat just to satisfy physical hunger, right? So people will turn to food for stress relief, to reward themselves. We all know about the chocolate reward when you finish a good job or you finish a race, for instance, or food to feel comfort, right? So the thing is that when people turn to food for comfort, they tend to reach for not the best foods, right? They reach for sweets, they reach for junk food, they will reach for other comforting but unhealthy foods, right? So the thing here is that when you're feeling down, you are more likely to order pizza or reach for a pint of ice cream. Like if you feel lonely, for instance, and we've all done this, right? I'm not pointing fingers here. We are all in this together. We've all done this. You're bored, you just want to order pizza, you want to get some popcorn. If you're feeling stressed, if you had a stressful day at work, you want to swing by the drive-through. We've all done this. So emotional eating means that you're using food to make yourself feel better, to fill emotional needs rather than your stomach, right? Now, the bad news here is that after getting after quenching the cravings, after getting the little high that you get while chewing and getting the food, the bad news is that the problem is still there, because emotional eating never fixes emotional problems, right? It makes it worse, as a matter of fact. All right, and because not only you still have the original emotion that fed into that triggered the emotional eating process, you also feel guilty for overeating. Now, how to find out if you're an emotional eater? This is very important. And there are several questions. Again, here, this is not medical advice or psychological advice of any type. If you have some problems that might be similar to emotional eating, please consult with your healthcare professional, because everybody has a different situation. This is more a general information show. How to find out if you're an emotional eater? Do you eat more when you're feeling stressed or anxious? Do you still eat when you're full, for instance? When you're not hungry, when you're not hungry? Do you eat to feel better? Do you reward yourself with food? I've done it. I still do it sometimes, just a bar of chocolate, just to feel better. Do you regularly eat until you've stuffed yourself? Does food make you feel safe? Do you feel like food is a friend? Do you feel powerless or out of control around food? So those are a few questions that may help you to identify whether you have emotional eating patterns within you or symptoms. All right. Now, how does the emotional eating cycle play out in our lives? So actually, we have a picture on the screen you can see right now. And this picture is very simple. It explains the emotional eating cycle. So it starts with you feel upset or anxious about something. Then you feel an overwhelming urge to do something to counter that thing that upset you in the first place, right? So the next area, as you can see on the screen, you choose food as the best counter. So you thus feel an overwhelming urge to eat, right? And you eat far more than you should, thus trying to crush the thing that upset you in the first place. And the last stage here is that you feel guilty and helpless over food, right? So this is basically when I'm talking about upset. The initial trigger is that you feel upset about something. Now that Upsetting can come from you being stressed, angry, lonely, exhausted, bored, whatever it is. Whenever you have a gap, or lonely, I've spoken about loneliness. Whenever you have a gap in your mind, in your life, around you, and you are reaching out to food as a companion, we have an emotional eating problem. And remember, emotional hunger cannot be filled with food. As I said earlier, you get, after the temporary highs, you come right back on earth. Because eating may feel good in the moment, but the feelings that triggered the eating are still there. All right? I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're still talking here about emotional eating and how to stop it. Now, if you love the content clarity and quality, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on the notification bell so you are informed whenever we release a new show. Now, the Sweetie Kiwi shows is aired every single day. We cover a bunch of diverse topics. Rain or shine, you'll hear from us. Comment below. Give us your opinion about emotional eating. Is this something you've thought about? Is this something that you're still struggling with? And how is your progress so far about that? Like this content. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here, I want to compare and contrast emotional hunger and physical hunger, right? Because before you can break free from the cycle of emotional eating, you need to understand how to create a distinction between both, right? Now, it's not as tricky as you think it is, all right? Now, again, we have a graph on the screen that you can see. We've summarized this for you so you can see it. Emotional hunger and physical hunger. So emotional hunger arises suddenly, while physical hunger arises gradually. If you are emotionally hungry, it feels like this hunger must be satisfied immediately. Physical hunger most of the time can wait, and this has been proven. So when you hear the growl in your stomach, that's actually ghrelin, the hunger hormone. And research has proven that if you just wait 30 minutes, that hunger hormone will go away. So the little noise in your stomach will not persist. So hunger, physical hunger, that is, can wait. Emotional hunger makes you crave certain comfort foods, right? I talked earlier about pizza, about chocolate, ice cream, popcorn, candies, right? Whereas physical hunger gives you no prerequisite foods. You are open to all options. When you're physically hungry, you just want to eat. You just want to reach until satiety, right? You just want to be able to have a full belly. That's all. Emotional hunger can be satisfied even if you're not full. In other words, let's say you're mad at something, you're upset over something, and you get yourself a pint of ice cream, right? You don't have to finish that cone to feel comfortable because you were not hungry physically in the first place. It was something compulsive, right? Now, physical hunger, by contrast, stops when you're full. Again, the fullness here, that's what we call satiety. That's what I call satiety, right? So emotional hunger, and that's the last criterion here, triggers feelings of shame, guilt, and helplessness. Whereas physical hunger triggers no negative emotions. You're happy to be full. All right? So this is basically the distinction to have when it comes to emotional hunger versus physical hunger. Now, identify your emotional eating triggers. One of the way you can very easily, the initial stage when it comes to stopping emotional eating is identify your emotional eating triggers, right? So what are the personal triggers? What feelings makes you reach for the comfort of food? What situations, what circumstances, what places, what people, right? Do you do this when you're around friends, right? It's because most emotional eating is associated to unpleasant feelings, right? But in some cases, as I said earlier, it can be triggered by positive emotions, right? Such as rewarding yourself for achieving a goal or celebrating a holiday or a happy event. I think I've said that before. I'm guilty as charged myself for emotional eating around positive events, birthdays or achieving a goal. Yes. Now, the common causes of emotional eating include stress, that we know, right? Especially chronic stress, stuffing emotions. I'm talking, anger, sadness, anxiety, loneliness, fear, resentment, and shame, right? So you're actually ramming yourself with food because you're trying to avoid the difficult emotions you'd rather not feel. Boredom or feelings of emptiness also are associated with emotional eating. Childhood habits, right? So we all have great and sometimes not great childhood memories of food, right? So if you think about, the reflexes that we developed over the years, for instance, did your mama or your daddy reward good behavior with ice cream, take you out for pizza, when you got a wonderful GPA, or serve you sweets when you were feeling sad? So those habits that we formed in childhood come back, maybe to hunt us as adults, right? To hunt us in adulthood. Another thing you want to think about is the social influences. I said that before. Do you actually stuff yourself around certain people? Because you have to understand, if you basically get together with other folks for a meal, that could be a great way to relieve stress, right? But it can lead to overeating, especially if the other members of your team are not that concerned with health, right? Or this could also be your family or circle of friends, right? That encourages you to overeat. So you want to make sure that you are identifying the correct triggers. Is it stress, stuffing emotions, boredom, or feelings of emptiness, childhood habits, social influences? I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi, and I'm going to talk now about I'm going to give the answer to this particular question that we posed at the beginning of the show: how to control and how to stop your emotional eating triggers. There are several ways, and maybe your situation is different, so you might want to just pick and choose whatever works for you, and maybe also consult a healthcare specialist so that you have a proper plan to deal with emotional eating. Now, you can keep an emotional eating diary. So if you're able to keep a diary, you can control and you can monitor your eating patterns. You can see what causes the emotional hunger in the first place, so that you can avoid that in the future. What I was talking about earlier, the triggers, where you're stressed, where you're around a bunch of folks who encourage you to overeat, where you're feeling emptiness, where you're feeling loneliness, what really caused you. So if you can basically articulate that in a diary, in a notebook, this can help in the future in terms of analyzing the situation and finding best ways to cope with the symptoms, best way to prevent the symptoms from happening again. Practice mindful eating. This is one of my favorite subjects. Mindful eating is very important. We're going to have an entire show dedicated to that. And mindful eating is very simple. It just means that you're paying attention to what you're eating. You are in the moment. You're just forgetting about driving. You're not playing with your phone. You're not watching TV. You're not listening to music. You're not talking on the phone with a friend. No, you were just enjoying your food, right? If you are at a restaurant, you're not looking around at all the distractions around you. You're not looking around how the couple next to you are eating, or how the child of the couple next to you is behaving. You're just relaxing and chilling. You're just enjoying your food. That's mindful eating. And mindful eating can really help you a lot because it can help calm you on the emotional aspect of things, and also help you reach satiety quickly without eating much, without overeating. Find other ways to feed your feelings. This is also very important here. You want to be able to find other ways to feed your feelings. For example, do you want to basically start working out, going to the gym, right? Because whenever you are, let's say you feel hungry, or you feel emotionally hungry, that is, and you resort to food, that's a bad combo, right? You might want to find, let's say, whenever you're sad, you listen to music, or you watch a comedy show. Whenever you feel empty, you call a good friend. Whenever you feel depressed, you basically reach out to a mentor, or you volunteer. You go to the local animal shelter. You need to find things that work for you. You need to find other ways to feed your feelings, and kick out food from the equations. Another thing you can do is to create alternatives to emotional eating, right? So as I said earlier, this is a way to not only feed your feelings, but also a way to preserve yourself, to take care of yourself, right? You can read a book if you're bored. If you're exhausted, treat yourself with a cup of tea. Light some scented candles, wrap yourself in a warm blanket, right? Hug your cat or dog. If you're anxious, for instance, you could dance, right? You can take a brisk walk. One thing you also want to do is that you want to pause when cravings hit and distract yourself with something. You probably noticed that all the ideas I'm giving you revolve around the mind, because the control of the mind is paramount, is quintessential when stopping emotional eating, because the word says it all. Emotional, it comes from the mind, right? So you want to constantly check in with yourself. When you feel an urge to eat constantly, take a pause and think about it, right? And you want to distract yourself with something else. Another thing you need to do is you need to learn to accept all your feelings, even the negative ones. That level of acceptance is very important. That will make you comfortable in the short and long run. This is very important because you want to get to a point where you're grateful for anything that happens to you, even the negative feelings. But now, once you acknowledge them, you'll be able to find ways to solve them. But it starts with acknowledgement. You have to recognize that something is not happening, that you're not feeling right, and you have to understand why. The why is very important, right? So for instance, you might be powerless over food, but that emotional hunger actually comes from something else. It comes from an emotion. It comes from a trigger. By accepting that trigger, you are taking the first steps to find a solution for it. You're taking the first steps to fix it, but it has to come from acceptance first. All right? I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of Sweetie Kiwi. We're still continuing our conversation. We're about to wrap up today's conversation, and here's a recap. Today's conversation revolves around how to stop emotional eating, and I explained to you what is emotional eating, how to find out if you are an emotional eater. How does the emotional eating cycle play out in our lives? I gave you a distinction, a compare and contrast of emotional hunger versus physical hunger. I showed you how you can identify your emotional eating triggers, and most importantly, how to control your emotional eating triggers, right? Now, the thing here is that, and this is today's call to action, before we wrap this up, support yourself with healthy lifestyle habits. I'm talking to be able to control emotional eating and even fix it once for all. You want to be able to set yourself for success. You want to have healthy lifestyle habits. I'm talking about daily exercise. Make it a priority. You want to aim for at least 6 to 7, even 8 hours of sleep every night. Make time for relaxation. Give yourself permission to take at least half an hour or an hour every day to relax, unwind and decompress, and connect with others. Don't be alone. Don't be lonely. Connect with people. Network. Find friends. Cultivate relationships. Meaningful relationships. That is, because those are the relationships you're gonna need when you're down. When you're having a downtime, you need to rely on those people. All right. Thank you for listening. I'll speak to you another time. And until then, stay marvelous.